It's a reflective time in Chris Norman's life as he approaches a major milestone year. Looking back on a journey where music has always been central to who he is. While he acknowledges the past, he makes it clear that he has no connection with the current version of Smokie and does not support it in any way. Back in the 1970s, however, Smokie was at its peak, with songs like Living Next Door to Alice and If You Think You Know How to Love Me dominating airwaves across Europe. Millions of records were sold, and Norman's distinctive, raspy voice became the defining sound of the band. When he eventually left, many fans struggled to understand why. Over the years, Norman has spoken more openly about that period, pointing to the pressures of constant touring and a growing sense of creative restriction. His reflections go beyond just telling the story of a successful band. They reveal deeper questions about identity, artistic freedom, and who truly owns a band's legacy. In recalling the early days, Norman often corrects the idea that Smokie began as a polished pop group. He insists they were originally a much heavier rock band, energetic and loud on stage, driven by strong vocals and tight harmonies. Formed in 1964 with school friends, the group went through several name changes before settling on Smokie, adjusting the spelling to avoid confusion with Smokey Robinson. Long before fame, they spent years traveling across the UK in a van, playing small clubs and pubs, often sleeping on rolled-up mattresses. It was a tough but formative time that built both their sound and their bond. Norman describes those years simply as an adventure full of uncertainty, but driven by hunger and determination. Their breakthrough came in the mid-1970s. After working with songwriters and producers Nicky Chin and Mike Chapman, hits began to flow, starting with If You Think You Know How to Love Me, which reached the UK top 10, followed by a string of successful singles. The band quickly moved from small venues to large concert halls, touring internationally and appearing frequently on television shows like Top of the Pops. Norman's voice became central to their identity, though he always emphasized the importance of group harmony. Their blend of glam rock and soft rock resonated especially well across Europe, turning them into a global act with millions of fans. Despite the success, the intense schedule and pressure to maintain a consistent sound began to weigh on Norman. By the mid-1980s, after more than 2 decades with the band, he felt creatively limited. In 1986, he made the difficult decision to leave, describing it as one of the biggest risks of his life. It wasn't driven by conflict, but by a desire to explore new directions. Starting a solo career meant leaving behind the security of an established band, but he embraced the challenge. His solo success came quickly, with Midnight Lady, which topped charts in several countries, proving he could stand on his own. Over time, Norman's relationship with Smokie's legacy evolved. Initially, he tried to distance himself from the past, but he later accepted that those songs would always be part of his identity. Today, he performs both his solo work and classic Smokie hits, recognizing that fans still connect deeply with that music. What once felt like pressure now feels like a shared experience with audiences, a bridge between past and present. In recent years, Norman has been more direct about his views on the current version of Smokie, especially after the death of bassist Terry Utley in 2021, the last original member. With no original members remaining, the band continues to perform under the same name, something Norman openly disagrees with. He believes the true legacy of Smokie belongs to the original lineup, who created the music and built its reputation. While he acknowledges that this practice is common in the music industry, he maintains a clear distinction between the original band and the current performers, emphasizing that the real identity of Smokie is inseparable from those who defined its sound in the beginning. As Chris Norman continues to reflect on his career, his perspective becomes less about separation and more about understanding. He no longer tries to draw a hard line between his years with Smokie and his solo journey. Instead, he sees them as parts of the same story, different chapters, shaped by different needs at different times in his life. The young musician who once traveled across the country in a van chasing success eventually became an international star, and later an artist searching for personal freedom. Each phase carried its own challenges, but also its own meaning. In later interviews, Norman May often speaks with a calm sense of clarity about fame and success. He acknowledges that the height of Smokie's popularity brought excitement, recognition, and financial stability, but it also came with expectations that were difficult to escape. The music industry, as he describes it, tends to hold artists within the image that first made them successful. For Smokie, that image was built on a very specific sound, melodic, harmony-driven, and instantly recognizable. While that formula worked, it also limited how far the band could evolve creatively. Norman realized that staying within those boundaries would mean repeating the same ideas over and over again. That realization played a key role in shaping his later philosophy about music. For him, creativity requires risk, even if that risk involves stepping away from something that already works. It's a lesson he has returned too many times over the years, especially when discussing younger artists. He often suggests that long-term artistic satisfaction cannot come from simply maintaining success. It has to come from growth. Without that, even the most successful career can begin to feel confined. At the same time, Norman does not dismiss what Smokie achieved. He continues to speak with respect about the band's history and the role each member played during its most successful years. The friendships, the shared struggles, and the collective effort that built their sound remain important to him. When he looks back, he doesn't see just hit records or chart positions. He sees the years of work that made those moments possible. The long drives, the small stages, and the gradual rise all remain part of that memory. What has changed most is how he measures success. In earlier years, success was defined by chart rankings, sold-out concerts, and international recognition. Today, his focus appears to be more personal. It's about continuing to perform, connecting with audiences, and maintaining a sense of authenticity in what he does. He no longer needs to prove anything in the same way. Instead, he values the ability to keep creating and performing on his own terms. This shift is also visible in how he approaches live performances. There is less urgency and more appreciation. Each concert becomes less about maintaining a reputation and more about sharing music with people who have followed his journey for decades. The audience, in many cases, has grown older alongside him, carrying the same memories attached to those songs. That shared history creates a different kind of atmosphere, one built not just on entertainment, but on recognition and nostalgia. Norman's reflections also touch on a broader question that affects many artists. What happens to a band's identity? Over time, as original members leave or pass away, the name can continue, but the meaning behind it can change. For Norman, this is where the idea of legacy becomes important. He believes that the essence of Smokie is tied to the people who created its music during its defining years. While the songs can continue to be performed, the original context cannot be recreated in the same way. Even so, he does not express bitterness. His tone remains measured and thoughtful. He understands that the music industry operates in a way that often prioritizes recognition and continuity. Fans still want to hear familiar songs, and promoters still rely on well-known names to attract audiences. Within that reality, bands continuing without original members have become a common occurrence. Norman simply chooses not to be part of that version of the story. Looking ahead, his focus remains on the present rather than the past. While he continues to acknowledge Smokie as a major part of his life, he does not allow it to define everything he does now. New projects, recordings, and performances continue to shape his career even decades after his initial success. That ongoing work reflects the same motivation that existed in the early days, the desire to keep moving forward. In the end, Chris Norman's story is not just about leaving a band or building a solo career. It's about navigating change over time, understanding the balance between success and creativity, and accepting that every decision carries both risk and reward. His journey shows how an artist can evolve without completely leaving the past behind. Instead of choosing between who he was and who he is now, Norman has learned to carry both, allowing the music, in all its forms, to remain the constant thread. Running through his life as the years continue to pass, Chris Norman's reflections take on an even deeper sense of perspective. Time has a way of softening the sharper edges of past decisions, and for him, the choice to leave Smokie no longer feels like a break, but rather a natural progression. What once seemed like a leap into the unknown now appears as a necessary turning point, one that allowed him to rediscover himself not just as a performer, but as an individual artist. He has often suggested that identity in music is never fixed. During the early years, his identity was closely tied to the band, a shared sound, a shared image, and a shared journey. But stepping away forced him to stand alone, to rely on his own instincts without the familiar structure of a group. That transition, while difficult at first, ultimately gave him a stronger sense of independence. It allowed him to explore different musical styles, experiment with new ideas, and make decisions without compromise. At the same time, he recognizes that audiences tend to hold on to the version of an artist they first connected with. For many listeners, Chris Norman will always be the voice of Smokie, no matter how much his music evolves. Rather than resisting that perception, he has learned to accept it. In his view, those early songs are not something to escape from. They are a foundation. They represent a moment in time when everything aligned. It's the right songs, the right people, the right audience. There is also a quiet honesty in the way he talks about aging in the music industry. Reaching a significant age milestone has prompted him to look back not with regret, but with awareness. He understands that the energy of youth, the relentless touring, and the constant pursuit of success belong to a different phase of life. What remains now is experience the kind that cannot be rushed or recreated. That experience shapes how he performs, how he writes, and how he connects with people. In more recent appearances, there is a noticeable shift in tone. His words carry less urgency and more reflection. He speaks about music not just as a career, but as something that has been woven into every stage of his life, from the early days of uncertainty to the height of international fame, and then into the quieter, more personal years of his solo work. Music has remained the one constant. It is not just what he does, it is how he understands the world around him. His views on legacy have also become more defined. For Norman, legacy is not something that can be controlled or owned outright. It is shaped by memories, by recordings, and by the way audiences continue to engage with the music over time. While he may disagree with how the Smokie name is used, today he accepts that the songs themselves have taken on a life beyond any single individual. They belong, in a way, to the people who continue to listen to them. This understanding removes the need for conflict. Instead of trying to reclaim or redefine the past, he focuses on preserving its meaning. The original recordings, the original performances, and the original spirit of the band remain intact in the music itself. No matter how the name is used in the present, those moments cannot be altered. They exist as they were, tied to a specific time and a specific group of people. As he continues to perform, there is a sense that each concert becomes part of that ongoing legacy. The songs are no longer just hits from the past. They are living pieces of history, carried forward through each performance. When audiences sing along, they are not just recalling old memories. They are actively keeping those moments alive. For Norman, that connection is perhaps more meaningful now than any chart position or commercial success. In many ways, the story reflects a broader truth about artistic careers. Success, change, and reinvention are not separate stages. They are interconnected. What begins as ambition can lead to recognition, which in turn can create limitations, which then require change. Each step influences the next. Norman's journey follows that pattern, showing how an artist can move through each phase while still holding on to a sense of identity. Now, as he looks forward rather than back, there is no clear endpoint in sight. Retirement is not something he speaks about with certainty. As long as he can perform, as long as there are audiences willing to listen, and as long as music continues to inspire him, he seems content to keep going. Out of necessity, but out of passion. And perhaps that is the most defining aspect of his story. Beyond the fame, beyond the band, and beyond the debates about legacy, there is simply a musician who never lost his connection to the thing that started it all. through every change, every risk, and every new direction. Music has remained the constant thread, quietly guiding him forward. Even as everything else evolved around him, in the end, what stands out most in Chris Norman's journey is not just the success he achieved or the risks he took, but the consistency of his connection to music itself. Trends have changed, audiences have shifted, and the industry has evolved in ways that no one in the 1970s could have predicted. Yet through all of that, his voice, both literally and artistically, has remained recognizable. It carries the same texture that once defined an era, but now it also carries the weight of experience. There is something quietly significant in the way he approaches that reality. He does not attempt to recreate the past exactly as it was, nor does he completely abandon it. Instead, he allows it to exist alongside the present. When he performs an old Smokie song today, it is no longer just a reproduction of a hit record. It becomes a reinterpretation shaped by time, by distance, and by everything he has learned since those original recordings were made. The meaning shifts slightly, not because the song has changed, but because he has. That idea of change is something he returns to often, even without stating it directly. Life moves forward whether an artist is ready or not. Bands form, succeed, struggle, and sometimes fade or transform into something unrecognizable. For Norman, accepting that movement seems to have been essential, as holding too tightly to any single moment, no matter how successful, can make it difficult to grow. Letting go, on the other hand, creates space for something new. At the same time, it does not ignore the emotional side of that process. There is an unspoken understanding that leaving something behind always comes with a sense of loss. The years with Smokie were not just a professional chapter, they were a personal one, filled with shared experiences that cannot be repeated. The friendships, the routines, and even the challenges were part of a specific time in his life. Moving on meant accepting that those moments would remain in the past. What makes his reflections compelling is the balance between honesty and restraint. He speaks clearly about what he agrees with and what he does not, particularly when it comes to the current version of Smokie, but he avoids turning those views into bitterness. Instead, he presents them as part of a larger perspective, one shaped by decades of experience in an industry where such situations are not uncommon. There is also a sense that he understands how audiences perceive these stories. For listeners, the details of band lineups, contracts, or internal decisions often matter less than the music itself. What people remember are the songs, the melodies, and the feelings attached to them. Norman seems aware of that distinction. While he may reflect deeply on the history behind the music, he also knows that for most fans, the emotional connection is what lasts. As a result, his performances today carry a different kind of purpose. They are not just about presenting music. They are about maintaining that connection. Each song becomes a link between different points in time: the moment it was first recorded, the years when it was played on the radio, and the present moment when it is performed live again. That continuity gives the music a sense of endurance that goes beyond any single era. Looking at his story as a whole, it becomes clear that it is not defined by one decision or one period of success. It is shaped by the way those moments connect and influence each other. The early struggles gave meaning to the success that followed. The success created the conditions that led to his departure, and that departure opened the door to a new phase of creativity and independence. Each part is necessary to understand the whole. Even now, there is no sense of finality in the way he speaks about his career. The journey does not feel complete, and perhaps it never truly will. As long as there is music to be made and audience is willing to listen, there is always another step forward, another performance, another reflection waiting to happen. And so Chris Norman's story continues, not as a fixed narrative tied to a single band or a single era, but as an ongoing evolution. It is the story of an artist who learned to navigate success without being defined by it, who accepted change without losing his identity, and who ultimately found a way to carry the past with him without letting it hold him back. And as that journey continues, There is a quiet sense that Chris Norman has reached a place many artists spend a lifetime trying to find, a balance between who he was and who he has become. The urgency that once drove every decision has softened, replaced by something steadier and more reflective. He no longer seems concerned with chasing success in the traditional sense. Instead, his focus rests on staying true to the music and staying true to the music. And to himself, that shift brings a different kind of freedom. Without the pressure to prove anything, every new song, every performance, and every appearance becomes a choice rather than an obligation. It allows him to approach his work with a kind of honesty that is difficult to maintain in the early stages of a career. Back then, there were expectations to meet, audiences to grow, and a place to secure in an increasingly competitive industry. Now, there is space to create, to reflect, and to simply enjoy the process. In many ways, his story has come full circle. The same passion that drove him and his bandmates to travel across the country in a van, playing for small crowds, and chasing an uncertain future, still exists, but it has matured. It is no longer fueled by ambition alone, but by appreciation.